Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Wheat fields across Oklahoma are looking pretty good right now. We begin today with a crop update and a word of advice for producers from our Extension small grain specialist, Jeff Edwards.
Overall in Oklahoma, the wheat looks pretty good. Northwest Oklahoma has missed some of our recent rainfalls, and they're still really touch and go in terms of how much moisture that they have. Southwest Oklahoma has picked up a few rains, and in central Oklahoma, the wheat that was planted in September has a lot of lush growth. We have a lot of forage out there, and we're ready to turn some cattle out on our wheat crop. In terms of subsoil moisture, we're still not quite where we would like to be. We've burned through some of the moisture we had in the soil. We are going to need some timely, regular rainfalls or moisture events throughout the winter to keep us going. Most of our wheat is out of the ground. It's large enough that this dip in temperatures are probably not going to do any lasting damage to the wheat. I think we could see some tissue injury out there, maybe some leaf burn, but in terms of lasting injury to the wheat, I don't expect any of that out of the cold snap. So whenever you see a field of green wheat, that wheat is transpiring moisture from the soil, so it's acting like a wick, pulling moisture out of the soil. We have fairly dry air conditions during the winter, and the wheat will use some water during the winter. So we need some regular rainfalls, a ½ inch or preferably an inch here or there during the winter to keep us going. The time whenever we really need rainfall to occur on a regular basis and we need a deep profile of moisture is in March, whenever the wheat is coming out of dormancy. And generally we do not get enough rainfall in the spring to keep us going, so we have to rely on stored moisture in the soil. So anything we can get this winter over and above what the crop would transpire will help us when March rolls around and acts like a reservoir for soil moisture that we can pull from whenever the wheat is trying to fill that grain head. We've had reports of green bugs active within the state, so it's important to keep an eye on those and really take care of that problem before it gets out of control. We should be out there inspecting our crops for weeds to see what type of weeds we have germinated. I've sprayed a couple of locations for Italian ryegrass already because we got a nice flush of weeds this fall and we took them out early. There might still be some spraying opportunities this fall in late November, early December if we get a warm spell. If nothing else, we need to be out there identifying the weeds that we have in those fields, so when spring does roll around and we have another opportunity to spray, we know what type of chemistry to use to get the best bang for our buck in our wheat field.
Thank you, Jeff. We want to continue talking about wheat with our Extension beef cattle specialist, Dave Lallman. And Dave, this time of year, a lot of producers turning out their cattle on wheat.
We've had a good fall, and so the wheat looks great at this point. And there'd be a lot of people, yes, turning stocker cattle out on wheat to graze, and probably a few cow-calf producers thinking about how to best utilize it this fall and winter as a supplement for their cows.
And what are some of the benefits of grazing cattle on wheat during the winter?
Well, I mean, from a very broad perspective, there aren't very many places in the country that can put 2 to 3 pounds of gain on a calf in standing forage like we can wheat in Oklahoma and North Texas. So that's a very unique benefit. And then if you're a cow-calf producer, you know, a lot of our producers do have a low quality standing native grass pasture or prairie hay, and that's very low in protein. Wheat pasture, on the other hand, is extremely high in protein, and so it makes for a complementary supplement, if you will, if you can find a way to limit graze those cows.
Now, speaking of limit grazing, in this pasture, you and the team have done some research on cattle on wheat. What kind of things have you found? Tell us, give us an update on that study.
Sure. We've just this last year completed a limit grazing project where we turned the cows out on the wheat 3 times a week for 4 hours each time. So about 8 a.m. to noon each day. And what we discovered, I guess, is that those cows can and will eat a lot of wheat dry matter during that 4-hour period. In fact, they consumed on average about 16 pounds of dry matter. So, you know, if you do the calculations, that's equivalent of feeding about 7 pounds of almost a 30% protein cube every day. So it's pretty valuable resource. Those cows came through the winter in a little better shape, body condition, and gained a little bit more weight than the cows that were on standing tall grass forage and a traditional supplement.
And the limit feeding works?
Well, it certainly does. A lot of people use it for that. You know, in our case, 3 days a week, 4 hours each time, was treating those cows pretty well. And you can imagine 16 pounds of 30% protein wheat that's pretty good. But so some people might want to cut back to 2 days a week. Other people might graze for 1 full day or 2 full days back to back and then take them off a week. So 3 days a week is going to be quite a bit, and those cows ought to do well.
Now this time of year, and in Oklahoma especially, the weather can change literally overnight from mild temperatures to really cold temperatures. So with winter here or repeating itself soon, what kind of tips do you have for cattle producers?
Well, at this point, if we get another bad storm, for example, I think what producers really want to do is just primarily monitor the condition of their cows. Hopefully they started the fall in, say, a body condition score 5 or average condition or better. And so what you want to do, especially if you're talking about spring calving cows, is not let them slip down to a 4 or even a 3, because that means they're losing weight and they have less chance of having a healthy calf that'll bounce up and nurse and have less opportunity to breed back early next year.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave Wallman, our Extension Beef Cattle Specialist.
Hi, I'm half-frozen Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Who pushed us over the temperature cliff? Monday afternoon, November 10th, it was toasty warm. The lowest maximum air temperature in Oklahoma was 74 degrees at Westville. The highest temperature on Monday afternoon was 87 degrees at Freedom. Monday was windy, but it was warm. Wednesday, the highest daytime temperature in the state was 45 degrees at Idabel and Broken Bow. Only 3 other Mesonet sites made it to 40 degrees: Worcester, Mount Herman, and Hugo. For most of us on Wednesday, the daytime high never made it above freezing, and for folks in the Panhandle, Slapout was the warmest Panhandle spot at 21. Boise City's high was only 15 degrees. The chill from the wind made it feel like 5 degrees in Boise City, even at the warmest part of the day on Wednesday afternoon, and in the teens in central Oklahoma and the 20s to the south and east. And it wasn't just the Panhandle that went through a rapid change in temperature. A graph for Tulsa shows the drop from a high temperature close to 80 degrees on Monday to Wednesday's high that struggled to hit the freezing mark. And with winds gusting over 20, wind chills made it feel like 20 in Tulsa on Wednesday. The Cattle Comfort Index for Monday showed what a shocking change it was for cattle. At Hooker in the Panhandle, cattle felt like it was 91 just before 4 p.m. 8 hours later, just before midnight, the Cattle Comfort Index was 0 at Hooker, a 91-degree drop in 8 hours on Monday. From beach-like weather to mountain freezing. One benefit of the cold temperatures is that it helps reduce water loss from our soils. As the cold settled in on Tuesday of this week, the 4-inch fractional water index map had lots of green, indicating good soil moisture at shallow depths. Exceptions were in the southwest and Panhandle. At 10 inches, the fractional water index values indicated good soil moisture at most Mesonet sites, values at 9/10 or 1. A value of 1 means the soil is at full water holding capacity. The locations with drier soils at 10 inches, the dark brown areas, expanded in the southwest, northwest, and panhandle. Going deeper in the soil to the 24-inch level, we see the impacts of long-term drought. Wet, shallow soils, deeper down, dry soils. Indication of extremely dry soils expanded across the entire panhandle over to Woodward. Down in the southwest, deeper dry soils extended back into central Oklahoma. Dry soils at 24 inches are indicated around Enid and from Durant up to Tishmingo. In the eastern third of the state, there is good soil moisture from the surface down to 24 inches or deeper. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
During this period of really good cattle prices, it's important that every cow that we have has a calf each year. At this time of the year where many spring calving operations are culling some cows, then we have some really tough decisions to make as to whether we're going to keep some of those really older cows back for one more year to see if they'll have another calf. Obviously, the answer to that question is very individualistic. Cows are different, ranches are different. But we can look at some data to get some idea of when to expect productivity of these cows to start to decline by the age category that they're in. There's some research data out of Florida that looked at a very large ranching operation with a lot of cows over a 2-year period of time. These cows were what we call F1s. Those are those that are half Brahman and half British influence cows. Cows that are notorious for having long lives and staying in a herd a long time. These cows, quite frankly, are not given a lot of extra feed. They're not pampered. And so as you look at the calving percentages of these cows through their age categories, you don't see real high calving percentages. But what we can notice is that as these cows get out to about 8 years of age, then there's a slight decline that starts between 8 and 10 years of age. Very slight, and probably means that it's a time when we want to keep a close eye on the cow, but not necessarily cull her just because of her age. As we get to that 10-year category and start going towards 12 years of age, the decline becomes a little bit steeper. Again, cows that are still in good body condition, are sound of mouth, sound teeth, certainly at this age can be kept around and be a good gamble for future calf crops. Once we get to that 12-year-old category, this data set shows that the productivity is falling off pretty rapidly. We probably need to expect those cows to be much harder to keep in good body condition because they're losing the soundness of their teeth. They're quite frankly just getting well up there in years. Probably not a real good bet to keep them around through another winter, and once we get to that category, certainly candidates to be culled. Cows are going to be different. Individual cows can go longer, some will have to be culled at a younger age, but I think this gives us some idea on the average of what to expect as these cows age from 8 to 10 and from 10 to 12 years of age and upward as to the kind of decline that we can expect in their productivity. We'll look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Joining us now is Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist. And Kim, last week on SUNUP, we talked about wheat prices dropping below $6. What have we seen since then?
Well, wheat prices fell down to $5.65 on that KC December contract price. They wallowed around for one whole day. The next day after that, they increased to $5.99 a quarter. Then they went above $6. And the good news is that price increase was on high volume, and that's a positive sign for prices.
What do you think caused this rally then?
I really don't know. The WASDE report came out. They increased hard red winter wheat ending stocks 20 million bushels. They lowered hard spring wheat ending stocks by 30 million bushels. Total all wheat ending stocks they lowered by 10 million bushels, which is really insignificant. I think it's just the market reacting to demand and conditions.
You mentioned the supply and demand report. How did it look for corn?
Well, I think it was positive for corn. They lowered the per acre corn production from 174.2 bushels per acre to 173.4. Trade was expecting it to go up to about 175. On the corn production, they lowered it from 14.5 billion down to 14.4. On ending stocks, they lowered it slightly. On world ending stocks, they increased it just a little bit. But the surprise was the per acre, and you got a positive reaction on corn prices.
And how about soybeans?
Well, soybeans is on an uptrend right now, and I think that uptrend is going to continue. You look at that December or January contract, it's above 10, and it's got to break 10.50 to continue the uptrend. The target could be 11 if it breaks that. You know, there was essentially no new information on soybeans on the Wall Street report. I think there's just positive action going on in the markets right now.
So with all this in mind, if I have wheat and beans, should I sell?
I think you should sell some of the wheat and some of the beans. Maybe not go to the market with all of it. I think there's a higher probability that soybean prices are going up relative to the wheat. I think wheat's just going to continue sideways. Corn's on an uptrend, so you gotta stay with corn. Maybe sell a little bit of it too.
Okay, Kim Anderson, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
The fall of 2014 has been a very unique year. Very unique season in the sense that we've had really prolonged warm periods, and that has tempted many of our livestock producers to keep their cattle out on that native rangeland and those native grasses a little bit longer than they usually do. Another issue that we've seen some producers doing this year is that they've hayed really late. So if you hay into those fall months, you really can do damage to those native grasses because you're removing all that above ground leaf material that's done photosynthesis. It has storage of nutrients. It has some nutrients still in its leaves, but it hasn't had the ability, because you removed it all, it doesn't have the ability to move those nutrients or translocate those nutrients below ground to store them over winter in those rhizomes and those crowns. And so really you can cause really kind of two types of damages to those grasses. One, there's a chance of winter kill. Just because they are really exposed, and depending upon the temperatures throughout the winter, we could see some of winter kills occur if we've used those grasses too much and not left them any protective soil covering. But also we can, if we've used too much of their above ground growth, we really can decrease kind of the success of their regrowth the following year. Our tallgrass prairie is amazingly resistant. It can handle heavy use, sometimes for years, but it's had a hard past few years with the droughts and the mixed grass prairie and certainly the short grass prairie. So we really want to think about helping those plants regain their vigor so that they can produce us the forage that our livestock producers need to get the weight gains that they're looking for.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. It's getting to be that time of year where we're going to be thinking about putting some of our small engines away for the season.
And not necessarily even just small engines, but even some of our bigger equipment too. So we're going to be talking about some things you may want to look at before you put them away for the winter.
One thing you probably want to do is change the oil, especially if it's going to be sitting for a while. If it has filters, then just go through that whole oil change, filter change scenario.
And the reason you want to do that is you've ran that engine and you've got all them impurities, those impurities, let me use the proper grammar, those impurities in the oil, and so you want to make sure and drain that out and put fresh oil in it so it's sitting there all winter long with fresh oil.
The other thing you may want to look at is the fuel system on the engine in particular, and think about some kind of stabilizer or draining that fuel.
Yeah, the best thing to do is probably drain it and run it till it runs dry, but like Randy said, you can purchase some stabilizers at practically anywhere in the auto parts store and put in that engine to keep that fuel fresh over the winter time.
Yeah. One of the advantages of the stabilizer, if you've run that a little bit in there, is it's going to keep some of your seals and items in your carburetor kind of wet, keep it from drying out over the winter.
Now once you do that, a good thing to do is if possible, why write down that service date on that engine, and you know that you've serviced it on a certain date and you have reference to that. You know, I can write it down on a piece of paper and throw it away pretty easily, but as long as it's with the engine, I know that it's been done.
So there's a few tips on getting some engines ready for wintertime and storage. We'll see you next week on Shop Stop.
We want to revisit a SUNUP segment from last January on livestock water needs.
Cold and icy conditions amount to just another day at the office for ranchers with hungry cattle. But delivering food is only one concern. Water presents its own set of challenges.
This has been a great year of understanding why it's such a problem to go out and chop ice every day, sometimes twice a day. We've had 2 big freeze-ups here before the first of the year, and a lot of people spend a lot of time chopping ice.
Still, it's important to address frozen water sources because cattle need more than you might think.
The rule of thumb that's easy to remember is about 1 gallon per 100 pounds of body weight in cows and calves, and that's cows that are dry or not lactating, gestating cows, up to about 2 gallons of water per 100 pounds of body weight if they are lactating. So obviously body weight is a big factor that influences their water requirements. And the other one is temperature. So the cooler it is, the less water they consume. The hotter it is, the more they need. The same goes with lactation. If they're not producing milk, their water needs are lower. If they give 10 or 20 pounds of milk, their water needs are intermediate. If it's a cow that may give 30 pounds of milk at peak lactation, they're going to be at the very high end, and it's a warm summer day, they're going to be closer to 2 gallons of water per 100 pounds of body weight. So real simply, a dry cow or a gestating cow on a cool day in the wintertime is going to consume about 12 gallons of water. Real hot day in the summer, a cow that's given 30 pounds of milk, she's going to consume closer to 24 gallons of water if she weighs 1,200 pounds. So just kind of a real simple way to gauge how much water cattle need.
If cattle are not getting enough water, how does that translate in terms of their forage needs?
Well, it's very closely associated with forage intake. And so, you know, if they're restricted for any reason, whether, you know, the pond is frozen over or the water line is broken, or the electric fence is in the wrong place, or electrifying the water and they just can't drink. The pond's gone dry. No matter what has happened, their forage consumption is going to go down, and the more it's restricted, the more it declines. And so you would expect their performance to go down if it's slightly restricted over a long period of time. If it's drastically restricted over a short period of time, you know, you're going to have health issues and dehydration and so on.
So obviously critically important. In terms of water sources and what options producers choose to set up, it depends on their operation and really where they are in the state.
Yeah, it's extremely variable, and you know, and you could, you know, they're low input, low cost systems to very expensive, more elaborate systems. And so yes, I think that's a good way to look at it. It's very much dependent on the area of the state, because in western Oklahoma, you know, you're primarily talking about a windmill and a large tank. In central Oklahoma here, we're talking about maybe a rural water source or a lake or a pond. In eastern Oklahoma, you've got about all the options where there's more surface water available, lakes, ponds, rural water, and so on.
Those with ponds have several options for maintaining access.
On a pond like this, where the cattle have access to the whole pond, one of the things you could do would be fence most of it out and then make an area that's, you could harden it up with some 3-inch rock or some other things and make just a single access point and make it a hard surface so that they don't have a problem getting in there. You could spend more money. This dam actually needs to be redone. You could go in and actually put a freeze-proof tank below the pond. That's a lot more work and a lot more expense.
The upside, however, is a much lower risk of cattle injury at the pond and no need to chop ice.
Normally these ponds, the drawdown on these freeze-proof tanks is probably 8 feet under the water in most ponds, so that water is going to be a little warmer, plus it's flowing through that tank and it will not freeze.
If you'd like to learn more, check out the link we've set up at sunup.okstate.edu.
Finally today, a reminder that help is near for those of you in the middle of making farm bill decisions.
Extension Farm Bill meetings are in full swing. From Poteau to Woodward, Durant, and Miami, our Ag Policy team is crisscrossing the state to help explain the new and updated Farm Bill programs, as well as talk about how their decision tool calculators work. For more information, we've set up a direct link on our website, or you can always call your local county extension office with questions and to sign up for the next meeting in your area.
And we'll hear again from our Ag Policy Specialist, Jody Campeacci, again very soon here on SUNUP. And with that, we say goodbye this week. A reminder, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.